Yeah, I think in that point, and I love how you just framed that out as protecting the asset. Like once you realize that this enoughness, this sense of enough is so precious, then it is your job to kind of protect the beauty of that, right?
Welcome to the Life Coaching for Mompreneurs podcast, where you will learn simple solutions to win at work without losing at home. Hi, my name is Martine Williams, and I'm your host and CEO, your Chief Encouragement Officer. And this podcast is your one-stop shop to creating a burnout-proof life and business by elevating your clarity, confidence, and courage. Friends, it's time to say goodbye to being the yes girl, to procrastinating on your goals and living in overwhelm. And it's time to say hello to creating healthy boundaries, healthy mindsets, and healthy habits so that you can achieve work-life harmony. Your next breakthrough starts here. This is the Life Coaching for Mompreneurs podcast. Let's do this. Hey friends, and welcome back to the show. Have you ever said to yourself, I'm not enough? Or have you ever felt like what you do, all the things that you do, that it never feels like enough? Well, today's Turquoise Talk guest, Barbara Burgess, is also the author of a book called Enough. And it's all about finding peace in a world of distractions, hustle, and expectations. And so we talk about what is the difference between a small no and a big no, and how do they help? How can you know if you're listening to that voice of not enoughness? So let me tell you a little bit about Barbara. She is an author, a mother, an executive, an unapologetic dark chocolate lover who's embraced the beautiful messiness of life. She founded Corluma, which is a Chicago-based consulting firm, wrote and performed a one-woman show, The Extraordinary Experience of Being Ordinary. I love that. And most recently, as I mentioned earlier, wrote her first book, Enough: Finding Peace in a World of Distractions, Hustles, and Expectations. We have a great conversation. I just love her peaceful demeanor and her unapologetic way that she talks about being enough. So without further ado, let's dive right in, friends. Well, hey friends, and welcome back to Life Coaching for Mompreneurs. Today we have our Turquoise Talk guest, Barbara Burgess. So thank you so much, Barbara, for coming on and talking about your book and learning a little bit more about you and the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Delighted to be here.
So let's just start with that. Tell us just a little bit about you and how you got into the work that you're doing today as an entrepreneur, as an author, and yeah, your family, all the things.
Yeah, I think many of us, it was sort of you kind of landed there.
Right? Accidental entrepreneurs.
Exactly. Very much so. And, what a blessing that has been. But
Yeah.
I had been working at my previous company for over 2 decades, and it was time, for a lot of reasons. It was time from the sense of it was just time for a change. That was one bucket. There was another bucket of, my kids I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they were coming up on those teen years at the moment. And, I knew enough because I'm a later in life mom. So my friends' kids are already working. Like there's always been this gap, right? But I knew that us having contact as they were in these teen years would happen in the cracks. It wasn't going to be, when they're young, when they're 8, 9, 10, you're taking them to every activity.
Right.
You're deciding what things they sign up for. And this was a shift. So I wanted to be there in the sense of not all the time, not in the full places, but to be able to catch those little moments of contact before they, fly the nest. So that was the second bucket. And then the third bucket was really, there was a lot of things at the organization that weren't working, hadn't been working. And bless my optimistic, self who was like, if I just try a little harder, that will happen. And my metaphor I used is like I was hitting my head against a brick wall for the third time and being like, okay, that wall's not moving.
Right. Right. Yeah. That explains a lot. Yes.
Exactly. So all of that kind of happened. And so in this regard, like I had given a very long notice because I had been there so long. So I ended up taking about 6 months to transition out. And it's not that folks hadn't suggested, having your own business and all that kind of stuff, but I just was so unconsciously stereotyped in what I thought that looked like, right?
Yeah.
And who I thought that was. And, I never thought of myself as a risk taker. And, you have to be a big risk taker and you have to have a huge appetite for that and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, that's not me. And thank goodness I didn't indulge that too long, because all of the beauty that can come with just being the only person that had to decide if I approved of something
Yeah.
was like a
Woo!
delightful miracle in itself, right?
Yeah.
There, all those kinds of things. So I set up the business and then just started networking, started me just do what all the folks do. And it has just been such an amazing adventure in ways I hadn't anticipated. And also, of course, with all the hard stuff too, right? There's
Oh
all the
yeah.
lessons
Oh
you
yeah.
learn by being in the weeds with it. But, that, I said I kind of created some cracks in the sidewalk, right? That allowed for me to write my book. I wrote and performed a one woman show, one night only kind of thing last year. Like none of this stuff would have happened had
Hmm.
I not created the space for, and again, I know this is a lot of the themes of your podcast, but space for myself,
Yeah.
really to exist in my own life and career and world and some of those things. So it has been a wonderful, beautiful, rocky, fun adventure. And, here I am 3 years later, loving what I do. Business continues to expand. I just keep asking myself, like, who am I in the next phase?
Who do I get to be now,
Who do
right?
I get to be now? And by the way, I love that phrasing, get to be. Like, that's one of the big things, right? Not have to be, not should be, not anything, but who do I get to be? And, the lovely opportunity to say whoever the heck I want. And won't this be cool to figure that out?
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's a lot of women that listen to the podcast, and I'm sure women that you've got to meet too through your journey, that it's just asking themselves that question and then taking the time to answer it. I think we're
Yeah.
so used to everyone else telling us who we should be or who we need to be or what position in our job we should have, or again, just all the different areas of our life. And we just kind of get used to, well, if they say that's what I should be doing, then that's what I
Yeah.
should be doing, right? Air quotes. My audience knows what I think about the word should.
Yeah.
I think it is like a really valid question to ask as long as you're willing to answer it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that also takes some muscle building, right?
Yeah.
Like I find myself consistently individuating over time. It is like layers of an onion.
Mm,
Who I was a year ago is not who I am now, which is part of the beauty of this journey.
yeah.
But to really say, like, how would I answer that now? And how would I answer that now? And, one of the things I think that I've discovered is I know that life is fluid and dynamic, but so am I.
Yeah.
And please don't box me into, I don't even care if I said it 6 months ago, I'm somebody else now. So how I might get to answer that question today
Mm,
is different than how I felt like I resonated before, right?
yeah.
But it took muscle to be able to really have that level of introspection,
Yeah.
and to, I think you almost have to pull out all that other stuff and look at it
Yeah.
and
Sure.
go, oh, here's what they're wanting. Oh, here's what my kids would want. My husband would want, the world wants, social media tells me. Let
Mm,
me pull it out of here and look over here and say, I see you.
mm,
And now, how do I tune into myself? Because I
yeah.
think it's difficult for us to separate ourselves from the rest of that because we're so used to becoming the glue and infusing and becoming caretakers and caregivers and filling in the cracks. It's like, where do we start and stop?
Yeah. Yeah. And it requires a slowdown, which most
Yes.
ambitious women are not wanting to do. It's like,
Yeah.
let's just keep moving forward. But sometimes you find yourself with that ladder up against the wrong wall, right?
Yes.
Building something that is not even what you want. And then you get there and you're like, this is not even what I want.
Yes. Well, even to that point, I had done a lot of, trainings and different things. And I still love to do trainings. It makes me happy. But I had done a women's leadership training not long after I launched my business. And it was lovely. It was great, all that kind of stuff. But at that moment, I was like, oh, yeah, no, I don't want to be doing this right now. Like it was just a stark, realization. And it wasn't because I love doing the content, I love delivering all that kind of stuff, but I just didn't want to do the logistics of it.
Yeah.
I kind of had forgotten how much that takes. And I was like, maybe for another time when there's a team that's going to do it, but not now, not me, not whatever, like not good use of my, life force at that point in time. So I love that visual of, what wallets that ladder's hanging
Yeah.
up against.
Yeah. And there's just so many different ways to do business, if we're talking
Yes.
to the entrepreneur, and like even, and there's different seasons and things you find joy in and energized by. And there's times where those same things can be depleting for you.
Yes.
It does just take you tuning into that. I mean, right now I'm in a season where I don't really love online marketing right now. Like
Yep.
want to be in person with my community and networking in person, face to face, belly to belly. And I can resist that and just follow the plan that I know will work online because I know how to do it online. Or
Yeah.
I can tune into, but this is not energizing and fun for me,
Yeah.
right? And choose to go that route. So there's no one way to do any of it. It's just
Yes.
what is the thing that because people are attracted to your energy. They're attracted to, your passion and the things that you really do fuel you. And so I think, again, 3 years ago, I wanted everything to be online. Right.
Yeah.
But now I'm just in this season where like, no, like I want to be in my community and get to know the local women in my community and let them know about what I'm doing and speak at more events in person, not just virtual summits and all of those things. Those things are great. I'm thankful for those because I wouldn't know you if we didn't have
Yeah.
this technology, right? But I think it is just like tuning into even what you were doing 3 months ago. Is that what you're
Yeah.
doing now?
Well, and I think to your point, I think authenticity is such a buzzword, but I'm so aware of it in a felt embodied sense now than I used to be
Mhm.
some time ago. Like if I'm listening to someone, even if like there's a particular person I had followed and I just wanted to hate her so much, I mean, she was everything that would have bugged me before, right? But I couldn't. I tried so hard. And because what was happening was like her authenticity and the content she was doing was coming through. And above all else, that's what I most respect. And a lot of the frameworks I might even think about still might go back to her or other people I've listened to. But, I think what we think about authenticity, but what really is, can be very different. And I think going back to what you were saying originally is like, are we willing to be courageous enough to give ourselves the choice to be that radically ourselves? Which again, I don't even think is something you go find. I think it's something you discover while you're engaged. Like,
Right.
the authentic part of you before was doing all that online stuff, but the authentic part of you now wants to be belly to belly,
Right.
right? And I believe that that is heard and felt and resonated with in ways we're just scratching the surface of what science knows about those kinds of things,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. So tell us what led you into writing the book. Like, obviously, you're passionate about this work, but writing a book is definitely something that's on my list to do as well. But it keeps moving down the
Yeah.
list because it feels like it's going to be this huge project. And you talk to different authors, and I've had many on the podcast, and some are like, "Oh, it was great. This was the process," and then others like, "No, it took me this long." So we'll get into that in just a minute, but I would just love to know, like, what was your heart and drive behind writing a book? Because there's different ways to get your content to people, and not everyone chooses to do a book.
Yeah, and I frankly, it was an experience I had that led me to it in many ways. Like I thought I would write something someday, but it wasn't like I had an agenda that was the year that this came to me. But it truly was like in the book, I tell a story in the first chapter about this experience I had with sidewalk chalk, and it was when I felt this profound. My book is called Enough, and
Mm-hmm.
I had this experience on my front porch of feeling this profound sense of enough that was so physical in nature that just struck me, like stopped me in my tracks and struck me in a way that I hadn't expected.
Yeah.
And it unfolded, right? And so as that unfolded, it was like, wait, what's going on here? It really was this thing. And so I would be sitting at a coffee shop and I would just start catching these experiences I was having. And it was more and more over time to the point where I was like, I think I got to put this in a book.
Yeah.
And given that the title is Enough, and I have worked for authors before, so I know how the game works, right?
Right.
I know about that thing. And I was like, I'm not going to do the pitch myself to a publisher thing. I'm not going to, like, I knew what I was going to do and not do. But it wasn't, part of it was doing it imperfectly, right? It
Yeah.
was like, I mean, I'm finishing doing my approvals on the audio version. And, were I to go back, I would re-record a bunch of stuff if I wanted to all be consistent. But that's not the point of my book. It's quite the opposite. It is this sense of enoughness, just as we are with no changes, right? And so I say that, in the book, Enough is a character. She's a she. She
Mhm.
comes into my life, and it was the experience I had. And so it was kind of like, okay, I think I'm going to do this thing. And after that, like once I had decided and I knew it not only could be imperfect, it was kind of supposed to be, It
Mm-hmm.
was just like, let's just keep cataloging it, getting it done. And I have enough experience with the different components of it that I could drive that process pretty well, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But the book itself, like, she kind of wrote it. I mean, I don't even know how else to
Right.
say it other than like, I just let those stories emerge.
Yeah.
And, and I've had this really true experience that when it was published, I really feel like the book was for me to be learning from,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So even though the book came out, it's like those concepts are active in my life today. I'm not a huge person in who believes in experts or thought leadership in the sense, of course, people have life experiences. They're super, super valuable. But, I think we're all code voyagers on this thing.
Right.
Again, being an executive coach, like the people that really look like they have everything impeccably handled, that's when you like lift up the, trunk and go, ooh, you know? And so that makes me a little nervous, right? And so even in writing the book, like it was about me sharing my experiences with enough and not enough
Hmm.
and kind of documenting that as I went. And so I felt like it was something I more surrendered to rather than
Right.
planned on.
That's usually the best work, right? Like,
Yes.
and I truly believe that, and I've said this for so many years, that the more of us that are willing to take off the mask
Yes.
and be willing to say, like, I'm not okay right now, or I'm struggling with confidence, I'm struggling with overwhelm, I'm struggling with not feeling enough, or I'm struggling in the burnout. It just gives us all permission to take that mask
Yes.
off because we've gotten really great at wearing masks,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
just putting on
And
that.
we're rewarded for that for a good portion of our lives, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's interesting because in re-recording the audio, there's certain, stories in the back of the book that I'd kind of forgotten about. And one of them was exactly like, I think I actually used that phrasing about dropping the masks, but I was at this women's leader conference and it was all the who's who and what's what and all that kind of stuff, right? And it was one of those like, why am I even going to, should I go to this thing? All that kind of
yeah.
stuff in my perspective, right?
Mhm.
And it went as I expected. Yes, I engaged, I did what I do because that's just how I show up, but at the same time it was kind of like I wasn't quite sure what the purpose was for, again, my energy being there. And it was the end of the night and there were women were sitting around. It was lovely. It was kind of storming outside and we're reflecting on the time, but I love public speaking and I'm a total introvert, right? So it's just that funny thing. And so I'm doing what you're supposed to do socially, but it's not like this was filling my cup, at the
Right.
biggest moment. And then I wound up on a couch next to two other women and they were passing around wine. And one of the women was handing it to me. And I, had said no, thank you. And she was like, oh, had asked me about it. And usually, like for me, I'm kind of private about certain
Right.
aspects of my life. But the truth is, I stopped drinking in 2001 because me and alcohol don't work together, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
love it, miss it, was wonderful. But and so before I'd even thought about it, the word that popped out my mouth to her immediately was, "No, I'm a recovering alcoholic." And like I don't tell, it's not like
Right.
something I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the whole room shifted, right? So she stops in her tracks and says, "Oh my gosh, I'm working with my brother right now.
Mm.
Has this issue and da 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 da." So she sits down and she was this fancy author, business owner, all the kind of things, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. And then the woman next to me, who's like a big philanthropist, very wealthy, all the kind of things, said, "I'm struggling with my son right now."
Mm-hmm.
And the three of us end up in an hour-long conversation in tears half the time,
Yeah.
saying what's so. And what I said in the book is like literally those masks, like you could hear them clunk on the floor, right? Because
Yeah.
none of those titles we came with, none of the impressive stuff, none of our pitching
And
meant anything at
yeah.
that moment. And
Yeah.
it was the belly to belly, heart to
Yeah.
heart. Who am I? Here's where it's hard for me.
Hmm.
Oh, they're having a hard time. Let me tell you probably about what that might be like for them. It
Yeah.
was just
Just
beautiful in
honest.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just honest conversations. And it just frees up so many people. Like, again, just that one statement that you said just really allowed those women to be comfortable and vulnerable to also share with you, the stories that they had. And I think it's just so powerful if we're willing to do that. But it has to start with you first,
And
right?
it's also like I get to share or not share as much as I'm willing to,
Right.
right? But
Right.
there were certain areas in my life that I made that choice intentionally. Like that night, it was almost accidental. But I will say, as a parent, there
Yeah.
was a time, I think my kid, my son was probably, I don't know, maybe he was kindergarten age-ish, but the drop-offs and the pickups and the moms and the yoga pants and the perfect things and the brags and
Right.
all this
Yeah.
stuff, like it's exhausting, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember people would be asking me like, "Oh, how's it going? How's your child?" Da, 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 da. And I remember intentionally choosing to be honest, right? And choosing to
Yeah.
say, "Well, this is going well, but I'm really struggling here."
Mm-hmm.
And the stories that would come back that you would never have heard in a million years
Yeah.
because you led with that vulnerability, I think are so priceless, right?
Yeah.
But it would have been so easy to just go along with the script and never
Oh,
be
just to
willing
say
to
you're
be that.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just say you're fine. One of my friends, that's her podcast is called Faking Fine.
Oh,
And she
oh,
talks,
great name.
that's a great name, but she talks about, her husband passed away at a early age, very healthy individual of cancer, just like poof.
Mm,
And she was like, I just kept telling everybody I was fine. I was fine. I was faking fine all this time and didn't realize like how much trauma I had and how much,
yeah.
grief that I was not processing and all of that. And so I think there are so many of us walking around with this faking fine.
Yeah.
And part of it, I think, is because I've had someone, I kind of pushed back some time, one time on a conversation. She was like, yeah, but when people say, how are you doing? If I really told them, they're not really asking me how I'm doing. They're just
Hmm.
saying the blanket statement. And that is true,
Yes.
people. But if you're like with your village, right? You're with your core
Yes.
people and they're asking you, like, who knows where that conversation would go if you would just be willing to say, I mean, to the point in your book, like, I just don't feel like enough right now. Like
Yeah.
everything I'm doing, I'm failing at.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, it's just going to open up so much conversation. I'll never forget when my husband had his first anxiety or panic attack, and then he started talking about it.
Mm,
And in his group, like, he's like, I didn't realize so many men struggle with anxiety. I didn't realize, like, it's again, they wear them too. It's not just women.
yes.
Men wear them too. And so it's just been really powerful for him to see as well. Like when I talk about my anxiety, like it creates safety for someone else to say, hey, me too. Right.
Well, and I love what you said earlier, tying this back is like it's so permission giving,
Yes.
right? So by him leading with that, it gives permission to anyone else. Like they may choose or not choose to be revealed, but it's literally like he's rolled out the red carpet, right? And I don't think and I'll go all the way back to the authenticity. I don't think we respect and honor the power of that level of just, saying it like it's so and what that can invite from other folks.
Yeah. Yeah. This work comes up a lot in my coaching as far as enough with my clients. And, we talk about them having to define that for themselves.
Hmm.
And it's such a foreign concept to them,
Yeah.
to really think about what is enough because it never feels like enough. As a mom
Yeah.
and as an entrepreneur, it just never feels like it's enough. But it's not really a feeling, right? If you're trying to feel enough, I think you have to also be believing that you are enough. That's where
Yeah.
it starts, right?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that for you and your journey to where I mean, I know you said you had this moment where you were like, the feeling came over you that I'm enough.
Yeah.
What kind of led you to that point? I mean, were there specific things you did or things you thought intentionally that kind of helped you to get there? Or was it literally just like a moment in time and it was just all of a sudden there? Hey, friend, let's talk. It's time to book your clarity call. We are going to spend 1 full hour focused on you. A clarity call isn't about pressure. It's about possibilities. It's about you. You having a space to talk through what's on your heart and mind, you walking away with a clear vision and practical next steps, and you feeling confident in what's next and how to get there. You don't need to have it all figured out. That's my job. All you need to do is show up and we'll figure it out together. This is the best hour you can invest in yourself right now. Not in 6 months from now, not next month, right now. And don't just take my word for it. Here's what one of my coaching clients had to say after working together.
When I started coaching with Martine, I was extremely burned out, overwhelmed, very stressed, and I knew I needed to make some changes. So I reached out, and over the course of time, she helped me realize that I needed to take back control of my schedule, create boundaries, And then along the way, I had a huge transition in my business, and she helped me figure out my next steps and help me structure a new business. And she's been there for me and been able to help guide me with her advice and her knowledge. Without her, I could not be where I am today.
That transformation, it starts with one conversation. It's time to stop spinning your wheels and start making real progress. So head right now to martinewilliams.com or in the show notes and grab your private clarity call spot on my calendar before they're gone. And since I personally monitor my inbox, if you don't see a time slot that fits your calendar, just send me an email at martinewilliams.com with 3 times that do work, and I will make it work for you. All right, friend, let's get back to the show.
I think it's all of the above in some ways, right? And first of all, I just want to underline what you said, which is, and I love that this is how you approach it with your coaching. I think it is a very personal definition, right? So even though what I'm talking about in my book is my experience, and that is never to mean that I could define for anyone else what that would mean to them.
Right.
And I think that alone is really essential, right? But I think, so I have a cousin whose daughter has a beautiful voice and has, worked with songwriters in Nashville, all that kind of stuff, and still hasn't, quote, made it. She's done loads of things, sung at a, National League football or Major League Baseball game, blah, blah, all those kinds of things. But we would joke about, the fact, she said, you don't realize that so many people we call an overnight success, it's been years in the making.
Oh, yes.
It's just they overnight became aware, to you.
Right.
But I think to answer that question, that's kind of both and for me. Like, I am somebody who's been a seeker, a journeyer, a reflector,
Right.
who's been willing to look at hard stuff, who's still willing to look at hard stuff, who's, done a ton of messes, who's made a ton of mistakes, all that kind of stuff. So all of that has led into these spaces. I think I was at a place of readiness, in some ways, but, it wasn't just that experience. It was, and I'm going to go back to what you said, creating the space for myself. Like, there's several things that can come together to allow that, right? But when I'm going with no space for myself, there is no room to ever even feel me, to your point, right? And so, like, I think fundamentally for us to, even if we don't believe it, to cognitively choose to prioritize ourselves and our time in some fashion.
Yeah.
And it does in ways that I'm sure in the clients you work with breaks so many rules.
Yeah.
Even my daughter the other day, I remember I was saying to her, she said, where are you going, Mom? And of course, like, when she's here, she wants me to be here, but when she's not, it doesn't matter, right? It's those moments. But, and I can't remember, I said, I'm going to a show. And I said to her, I said, your mom likes to have fun herself. She does, it was like one of these little like throw in things, but it was really affirming that, like, my daughter may want me to be at home in that moment, but the most important thing for that moment was going to this theater show I wanted to see by myself. No needs, no requests, no nothing around me, right? Yeah. But that was a muscle to begin developing, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that muscle started some years earlier with the kids in some ways. So I, with a friend's support, started doing, I called them mommy getaways at the time. I don't call them that anymore. But I would literally go away for a weekend. And the idea was to restore, renew, and do all those kinds of things. Well, again, busy working executive. At first, I just felt like I was failing those weekends because what do you do? And how do you do that? And all that kind of stuff. And then I got into this beautiful routine where I'd take a notepad and I would list on that notepad everything I could do while I was there. Not that I had to do and none of that. So it could be binge watch TV shows. It could be eat junk food. It could be cook a healthy meal. It could be go for a walk. It could be in nature. It could be listen to music, anything. But I'd fill the notepad. And the muscle exercise I got was I would get to that cabin, I'd unload my bag, and I'd look at the notepad and I'd say, is there anything on here I feel like doing this second? Right? Yeah. And I'd scan it and I would tune into my body and my body would tell me, yes, this, no, this. And I made no judgments about whatever it was because the person trying to rest had all these jujudgments about what that meant, right? And so
there's rules to follow. There's
rules,
a way to do
right?
it. There's a right way and a wrong way to do it.
Even that I can fail. I could fail that piece. And my friend kept me accountable. So I would try to go every quarter. And while I was at this one, I had to commit to her of having the next date picked. So that kept me in a rhythm. But looking back, what it did was tune me in with myself in a way that I could feel me, right? Yeah. And so if we go to this sense of enoughness, it's difficult to do without some of that reflection, crack, work, all of that was part of the readiness so that when I had this sense, I could actually feel it and be there for it.
Yeah.
It's not that I hadn't probably been barraged with a load of these moments otherwise.
Right. Right.
It
Yeah.
just, I was not there for them. I was not available for them. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
prioritizing myself and making the space for myself made me more available to have that experience
Mm.
of it. Right. And for me, it's very complex, even though it's a simple concept, because enough can mean everything from, at the core to me right now, for my own definition, is if I did nothing else, if my business went no other places, my kids went no other places, I didn't lose weight, gain weight, color my hair, do anything, I'm magnificent just as I am. It is that
Yeah.
increasing sense of acknowledging that is a truth, right?
Right.
But also with that comes, because as I acknowledge that, that also gives me permission to do any darn thing I want.
Yeah.
So ironically,
Yeah.
I end up doing a lot of things. And in partnership with that, it is also like a boundary thing too, right? Like, no, there is a sense of like, no, I'm done with that, right?
Yeah.
So it was this combination of sensing and appreciating and value myself. And as I valued that resource, drawing lines in the sand to
Mhm.
the things that didn't serve me energetically, emotionally, physically, and kind of reclaiming the power. Like, I get to change my mind. I get to have everybody upset by the choice I make. I get to do all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, so the awareness, yes, it was a bit of a light bulb flash, but then it was exercising that muscle again and again and again, right? To
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
creating the space for it.
Yeah. I love that you didn't use the analogy of a muscle because I'm thinking about somebody who's listening right now. That sounds amazing to be able to be so in tune with myself and to kind of see where you are now, right? Or where I'm at now and like just wanting to like jump the abyss, the Grand Canyon and try to get all the way over there.
Yeah.
Because we're highly ambitious and high achievers and high performers, but you just have to start with the first step,
Yeah.
right? And the first step when you're trying to build strength and endurance is you probably get some shoes, right?
Yes.
First you decide you're going to do it, then you buy the shoes, you buy the outfit, then you walk into the gym for the first time, and then you get sore and you're like, "Oh, that wasn't fun. I don't know if I want to do that again." You keep going and you're going to get stronger, right? And I think we dismiss the value of just taking the next step.
Well, and I often say to people, and this is, kind of a parallel track to what you're saying, like, even to start with, like, shopping the concept. Like, you
Right.
don't even have to buy it. Just
Yeah.
shop the idea that maybe in some, deep inner recess that I might be enough just as I am.
Yeah.
Like even shopping that idea helps, right? And I'm thinking about there's so many little things I started doing that I didn't necessarily track, but people talk a lot about gratitude, and I love the idea, and I feel like that's what I started doing. And if I just hang on to that world, and I'm sure it's part of my religious upbringing, but it feels like a moral thing,
Right.
like somehow like, whoa, you should be lucky for what you have, which is
Right.
not what I did. But I started looking for evidence of
Mm.
enough, and I
Yeah.
wrote it in a book. Like, I have it's still the teal book I have. And I would, have an experience, and it could be small, tiny, but like if someone looked at me kindly, or if something went my way or whatever, I started writing these out
Mhm.
as the mini miracles that they are, right? Because otherwise I am actively seeking evidence of not enough.
Yeah, true.
And so this forced me to have that experience. And again, there's story after story after story. Like, if somebody gave you something that works for you that you never had to pay for, that's perfect, like, wow, isn't that
Yeah.
a lovely thing? Like, I might just take that for granted, or somebody's willing to help, or they, make a contact or a connection. Like, all of these things are evidence of, the world, the universe telling you you're enough. I got your back. We can do this, all that kind of stuff. It's just, as humans, we're so used to scanning for evidence of the opposite. And to your point about high achiever, like, yes, if you told me, I got a 97% of the test, I'm going to be mad at the three things I got wrong.
No.
Right. Which just is like, so doesn't serve us. And in fact, I had this experience yesterday. My daughter hasn't played video games in a while, but she's like, come on, mom, let's get on. And I'm a hilarious older parent in the sense that, like, you're on Roblox or whatever. I can't even stand up my avatar and make it walk. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm so bad at it. It's not even funny.
me too.
But the hilarious part was, we're sitting next to her. She's on her phone. I'm on mine. And I just kept laughing. I was like, I am horrifically awful at this. And she's like, do you want to stop? Do you want to not place? I'm like, no, I'm having so much fun. I was having so much fun dying, being bad, having the monster eat me, whatever it was, which is not the same human, right? That
Yeah,
would scan
right.
those 3% wrong on the test. I would have like been so frustrated because I was terrible at it. And
Mhm.
instead I was just enjoying the fact that I was sitting here trying this thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's the difference in, for me, like if I, the word that always helps me with that is how can I just remain curious?
Oh, I love that. That word has so much power.
Yeah, because if I'm not curious, then I'm believing that there's a right or a wrong way to do something. And my brain
Yes.
always likes to go back to that. So if I can just stay curious and realize like my business is an experiment.
Yes.
Life is an experiment. I'm going to try some things and it might work, and I'm going to try some things and it's not going to work. But that doesn't, I don't have to make it mean anything negative about me.
Well, and it's funny you say that because in my spiritual game I play in my head is like at the end of days,
Yeah.
my vision is if there's God and love, and if we're at that moment and there's a transition point, which I hope so, that what they will ask me, however that looks, is like, how was it? What'd you think? How'd
Yeah.
it go? Like, this is
Right.
going to, not the
Yep.
moralistic thing I thought of judging I'm good, bad, right, wrong by some objective list, right? But that just this genuine curiosity of how did you enjoy the adventure you signed up for,
Right.
And so I, as a result of that, like I do tend to frame things out as a playground, like this is not about a right way and a wrong way. And I think even when you were saying that, like, if it, when we go right and wrong, we remove like a million different other permutations. And I
Yes.
think, as a coach too, oftentimes what you're doing with your client is helping them see that they see two options and
Yeah.
there are 10, you know,
Right. Yeah.
like buying the shoes is an option.
Yes.
Like that's something you could do right now. You don't
Yeah.
have to go, I'm either going to work out every day or I'm not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just the trap that so many of us fall into. And with this audience, we talk on this podcast, we talk a lot about the word no.
Hmm.
And it's a word that most people don't like to hear and most women don't like to say either.
Hmm.
But we talk about it a lot on here because that's what helps you create the boundaries, right? To
Yep.
protect your profits, protect, the asset, which is you. I firmly believe that. So I know you talk about small no's and big no's.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that could be very useful for these listeners.
Yeah, I think in that point, and I love how you just framed that out as protecting the asset. Like once you realize that this enoughness, this sense of enough is so precious,
Yeah.
then it is your job to kind of protect the beauty of that, right? And so what I found in my own journey over time was I had done enough self-reflection, development, blah, 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 to stand up to the things that were truly like morally offensive to me, right? Or if somebody did something that was very much a values disconnect, I had learned how to like rally and pull myself up to the charge. That was okay.
Right.
But where I would have a really hard time where that was a big no. The
Right.
small no's were hard. The small no's is somebody offers, hey, I've got a ticket to this fundraiser, will you come with me? And you don't want to go, but you don't have a conflict, right? So it's a small no, like it's a free ticket, right? But the answer is if I tune into my whole body, no, that's not a fit for me. Like that is a small no. Or
Yeah.
somebody, even at an event, like I had this happen where it's like, of course you get a free book with the event, but like I didn't want the book and I'm not going to read it. And I just said, thank you so much. But give it with somebody else who's going to, I just know myself right now. Like
Right. Yeah.
anything I'm doing, I'm listening on audio most of the time. And
Yeah.
if not, I'm very selective about what comes into my home. Right.
Yeah.
And I would never have done that before. Like it seems so small, it's so innocuous. Or somebody says, hey, you guys have a big house. Can you store this stuff for me? And the
Yeah.
answer is no, right?
Right.
But it's harder to say because there's not a big thing that screams to the world there's a good reason for it in their value set.
True.
And so, to just, learning to exercise the muscle, first of all, of saying the small no. And I don't even care if people lie up front, make up a lie if you feel comfortable. Eventually you get to the point where you're like, I don't even get a reason, right? My
Right.
my
Yeah.
section of the book is beautiful boundaries, zero apologies. Because I
Right.
don't need to apologize, explain, justify, or anything, right? So to say to the fundraiser person, hey, thank you for thinking of me, but no, or thanks, not a fit for me. Or thanks, assuming the thanks is genuine, I don't, and I, have friends that know me enough now out of this content that they'll be like, out of curiosity of journeying alongside, they were like, okay, was that like a conflict no, or was that just a no? It's not out of like judging. That's just like,
Yeah.
aspirationally trying to do the same thing. And so what I have found for myself and a lot of the women I talk to is if we're not willing to do the small no's, our calendars become filled with it, our houses become filled with it, our time becomes filled with it. It's again, whether it's a child, a spouse, an external person, a volunteer group, your whole life force is filled with those expectations. And then we don't have that crack we talked about.
Right.
Right. And so, but if I say those small no's, then there's space. And then I get to be curious to your word. I get to be curious. I wonder how I want to fill it. And any choice is fine. But I get to be in that journey of discovering myself in that moment and saying, I wonder what would serve me more,
Yeah.
with no measuring stick whatsoever, oh, napping, oh, whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what I have found for myself is the more confident I get in what is priority for me,
Yeah.
it makes it so much easier to say those no's because I'm not in proving energy anymore. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to prove to others that I'm the mom or I'm this person they're expecting me to be, or I deserve a seat at that table. And if I go to this thing, that's going to prove that I deserve a seat at that table or whatever it is. Like it takes me out of that proving energy. And now when I'm in confident energy, I can just stand up and say, no. I mean, no is a complete sentence. I don't have to say anything other than no, thank you.
Well,
You
and
know?
you just named, I have a section in the book, a subsection about proving myself, because that is my danger slope.
Yeah.
Like that is it. I watch myself and I'm like, oh girl, honey, what you doing there? Right. And what it really is the childhood relationship with not enough, right? Where not enough, he's sitting there going, well, if you only like, he's the one inviting me to prove myself more and more, because then I'll be enough.
Yeah.
Then I'll matter. Then
Right.
I will have arrived, right? And that is just a false bill of goods. Like, no, I don't need to prove in order to be enough. I
Yeah.
just get to choose that I'm enough as I am, right?
Yeah.
But that is such a slippery slope. Like I'm constantly watching that one, right? I might go to coffee with somebody and you notice yourself like, reverse bragging about something, in a way to like, oh, puff
Yeah.
myself up and I'll walk away and be like, oh, there you go. There it was. No need. Can
That's
we back
right.
off that one, right?
And I love that you share that because it's still there. I
Yes.
think we have this myth that I'm gonna figure it out and I'm never gonna have the proving energy come up again, or I'm never gonna have these negative thoughts about myself come up again. And it's just you catch them sooner.
Yes. Well, I always say it's like a volume. You turn the volume down,
Yeah.
right? So they're not as noisy, it's not as loud, it's not as compelling. And I catch myself way more often, right? And
Yeah.
that's where I think, again, the book started teaching me in those senses because having this contrast between enough and not enough has made it almost like a neon sign in my own life.
Hmm.
Writing about proving myself, then when I do it, it's like, oh goodness, I just felt that in every piece of my DNA. Remember, we don't need to, right? So it gives you more, I think, signposts and ways to be aware and catch yourself sooner so that the gradual trajectory, at least for me, is like I do it so much less than I used to. Like it's like I can identify the exceptions
Hmm.
rather than being the main script that was running the show.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you just have to be willing to take that first step and see it for what it is
Yeah.
and not avoid that. And like you said, just trying on the concept, just starting there, right? And
Yeah.
just being willing to do the work because it does require work. It does
Yes.
require, time to slow down and time to think and time to think about what you're thinking about and allowing all the emotions to come and not be afraid of the emotions that'll come with it and not judge
Yeah.
yourself for where you are right now because it's just where you are. It's not who you are. It's just
Yep.
who you are right this time. And so I think we're afraid to do that, a lot of us, to kind of take that first step.
Well,
So
I love the word that you used earlier about season, right? The
yeah.
season I'm in.
Mhm.
And so even for me, like when I'm going to work on the next hard issue that I'm, pulling out from under there, the next round of it, it's like understanding that that is just a season as well, right? I think it's the beauty of life. If we look to nature, it does recycle. There's death and rebirth happening all the time, right? And so we're always dying a little bit to our old selves as we allow the spring of our new selves to emerge and to allow that as a natural process. And I love what you just said, not judge it,
Mhm.
not say, oh, it shouldn't be this way, it should be
Yeah.
some other way. It's like really, I think, violent to ourselves
Mm.
to be that harsh as if I should be having some other experience than exactly the one I'm having.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, we could talk forever because you're so easy to talk to, and this topic is just such a big topic. But I want you to tell them where they can get the book
Yep.
and tell them about
It's
that.
available on, Barnes and Noble and Amazon. And, the title is Enough: Finding Peace in a World of Hustle, Distractions, and Expectations. And you do have to search Enough by Barbara Burgess because there's a lot of Enough books, which is a lovely thing. And then my website is beenough.com. And so on there, if you want to, there's a little, weekly tiny piece of inspiration. If you just want that little nudge to remember, from another perspective, they can do that as well there.
I love that. Well, we'll put the links to everything in the show notes. And if you could leave just a final thought with all the mompreneurs who will be listening to this podcast, what's one final thought you'd like to leave them with?
I would say that I will probably cry saying this because it's like I'm always talking to myself, right? But like the most radical, wonderful gift we could give to the world is that sense of really honoring ourselves and honoring our unique gifts, our unique journey, our fingerprint, what we're here to do with all of its imperfections, all of its things like that. I believe it's a revolutionary move to say, I'm going to value me and then kind of see what comes out of that. And I really do believe that we can make huge differences by making that one radical act.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. All right. Well, this has been so fun, Barbara. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I know people are going to be going out and getting that book. So I appreciate you writing it and then coming on here to talk about it.
Well, thank you. Just a privilege. Thank you.
All right, friends. Well, I'll catch you on the next episode. Well, that's a wrap, friends. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. I really hope it met you right where you are and gave you some encouragement for your day. Could you do me the biggest favor and leave me a rating and review? Seriously, it's the best way for you to support the show. And while you're there, be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Thanks again. And until next time, I am believing in you always.